Hey everybody, I'm Joe, the Gaming Addict. I first started playing video games, like console games, probably when I was about 5 years old. Sometimes by myself, sometimes with friends. But at that time, it was more of a hobby than anything. I wouldn't say that I was an addict back then, but the more I think about it, perhaps by playing these different console games on like evenings, weekends, things like that, perhaps the seeds of addiction were being sown in there. And just a little bit about myself. I have always considered myself to be an introvert. I've always struggled with patience. That's a very difficult virtue for me. Plus, I'm the type of person that is extremely competitive. And so for many years, I played games of different varieties, different consoles, some computer games here and there. But it wasn't until mobile gaming really took off that's when I first started to have a problem with games. My game of choice, it was based on a very popular series of toys from my childhood, which also had TV shows and movies made about it. And so for me, it wasn't just something fun to do, but it was also a form of nostalgia. It's like, oh, I get to kind of relive my childhood by playing this game. When I first started out, and that was probably about 7.5 to 8 years ago, I played it for a while, but I got burnout feeling like there was no end to it. And the more I think about it, I was right. There really is no end to it. The way these games are designed, they're very open ended. There's always new content, new challenges, new characters, new things to do. And as I've realized, a lot of times you can't access that unless you're willing to start spending money. So at first I played it for a while, kind of got tired of it, put it down for a year. And then about a year later, I happened to see an ad for it on Facebook. And then I started playing it again. And one of the things that really surprised me was I thought, okay, well, I put this game down. I'm going to have to start over from scratch. Well, no, that was not the case at all. All the progress that I had made during that first foray into the game was still there, and I didn't have to start over. And then I played for a while, but I've still hadn't got to that point of making those in-app purchases. And I can't remember exactly when that happened, but ultimately a day came when I said, okay, I'm going to start spending money to play this game. And that I think was really when the addiction kicked in. I mean, at the time, I didn't think I was addicted. I thought, oh, I can kind of regulate this, I can moderate this. But I started slow at first, but eventually it got out of hand. And by the time that I realized that I was an addict, and at one point during the summer of that year, my oldest son started playing the game as well because he thought it's like, oh, this is something fun to do with dad. As I think back on this now, when I was really in the throes of active addiction, and by that point, I really was deep into the game, it was consuming all of me. It was taking up all of my waking hours. I was playing it every second I got at work, at home, on vacation, while driving, at church, anywhere I could. And it's only by the grace of God that I didn't get fired or that my marriage didn't end or didn't lose my children or get in an accident because there were several times that I could have. Any one of those things could have happened, but fortunately, I was able to spare that. And so for a while, my son and I were part of the same group of players, but eventually he got kicked out because he wasn't quite performing up to their standards. I didn't really like that, so I tried to invite him back in and he got kicked out again. And then I was like, okay, I don't need you guys. I thought you were my friends. I thought you would accept me and my son, even though he's not as competitive as everyone else. We tried to branch off onto our own, try to start our own group, and that lasted for a couple of weeks maybe before it failed. And then I got accepted into an extremely competitive group of players. And I could remember one person in particular that acted like a mentor who I thought was my friend. And anytime that I started to doubt myself or doubt my abilities within this game, he would always say those magic words to get me to come back and continue to be part of this group. And by this point, I was spending way too much time and way too much money. And any limits that I tried to impose on myself, I never abided by. I might say I'm only going to make purchases 2 or 3 times a week, and then I'd end up making purchases way more than that. And when I wasn't gaming, I was thinking about the game, strategizing, thinking about what I wanted to do next. It was a very dark time in my life. And then finally, November 6th, 2019 comes around. That was the night coming home from church when my wife confronted me about how much I had been spending when she opened up the latest bank statement. She's like, what are all these charges? and I had to come clean. And it was right then and there I realized that beyond the shadow of a doubt, I was an addict and that I needed help. And I decided that I would do whatever I had to get the help that I needed, even if that meant giving up my smartphone and my tablet, which I did at first, and had to resort to an old fashioned flip phone for a while. And then a couple days later, she counted up how much I had spent basically in the year of active addiction. And I think it was somewhere around $3,000. And it's like, oh my God, I have stolen this money from my family. I have robbed my family for some stupid game. And I vowed to pay it back. And eventually I did, even though it was not easy. One of the things that I had collected a lot before was leather bound books and collector's edition books. And I had to sell almost all of them to basically repay the financial debt that I had incurred as a result of this gaming addiction. And then a few days later, my son and I actually went on a camping trip with what would ultimately become his Boy Scout troop, where he earned the rank of Eagle Scout. And we went down to Lake Texana State Park. And that for me was, in a lot of ways, a metaphor for my recovery. Here it is. I'm traveling to a state park, getting there late Friday night, getting lost twice, having to ask for directions, having to set my tent up in the dark. And in a lot of ways, that's what recovery kind of felt like. I knew that I had a problem. I knew that I was hurting and I knew that I needed help, but I didn't know really where that help was going to come from. I didn't know what recovery was going to look like. I didn't know if I would ever recover. But thank God I found CAA and found a therapist. And CAA really did save my life. I mean, this fellowship from day one welcomed me with open arms. And I am so grateful for that. Perhaps some people here are like that. They're just coming to terms with their own addictions. And the good thing about this is a family that accepts you for who you are, where you are, and won't turn anyone away. And there's a lot of different sayings that have been helpful for me as a part of being a part of the fellowship. Some of them are do the next right thing, progress, not perfection, one day at a time, living life on life's terms, 12 miles in, 12 miles out. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. This is actually my first 12-step program to be a part of. And so I kind of learned a little bit about the steps and I tried to work them on my own. But quite frankly, I didn't have much success because I didn't really fully understand what the steps were. And eventually I was able to find a sponsor that helped me to understand it and really worked with me a lot. And he's been a big part of my success thus far. And ultimately, all step work really does revolve around service to others. It's taking that focus off of myself and instead being more outwardly focused. And I've always viewed the 12 steps as a guide for basically changing my worldview and helping me to become more outwardly focused. And for a while, I actually served as the Wednesday night meeting leader as a means of giving back and trying to share some hope and encouragement with other people that may resonate with some of the things that I've been saying here. And I've been fortunate enough to sponsor some really great guys. And ultimately, I try to live each day to the fullest and be the best possible version of myself. And there's a couple of other things that have been helpful in my experience. One of them is the idea of Siren Island. And anyone that has read Greek mythology knows about the sirens and how Odysseus, on his way home from the Trojan War, had to pass by this island. And the sirens were these monsters, but who had beautiful singing voices. But anyone who ventured near to that island ultimately would lose their life as a result of this. And so for me, it's like just hearing those words helps me when those cravings come. Also, the idea of playing the tape forward, that's another saying that you may hear in GAA. To me, that's like saying, okay, if I go down this road, what can I expect? Is this something I really want to do? And it really forces me to kind of think, okay, is this what I want to do or not? And lastly, there is a quote from the song Hate Me by Blue October that I really like. And that is, I've been sober now for 3 whole months. It's one accomplishment you've helped me with. The one thing that always tore us apart is the one thing I won't touch again. Well, in my case, it's not been 3 months, guys. It's been 5 years. And quite frankly, I never thought I'd be able to say that. But because of GAA, because of this fellowship, and because of the great people that I've met, I can. And so for anybody that is out there, anybody that's brand new to this, anybody that's thinking, does it ever get any better? The answer is yes, it does get better. But it takes time. It takes coming to the fellowship. It takes reaching out to people, picking up that 1,000-pound phone to make those phone calls, but doing whatever it is you can do as part of your recovery to try to reach out, and the people are there. All you have to do is ask, because sometimes it's hard to reach out to others, and I get it. It was hard for me to make calls too. Ultimately, anything that you can do and just continue to plug into the fellowship, work the steps, talk to people, all of these things will help you in your journeys to become ultimately game free and put active addiction behind you. So that's all I've got for tonight. Thank y'all for listening.